I still remember the exact sound of the ice clinking in my glass that night. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but somehow it cut through everything, like my life itself had been reduced to that one small, fragile sound. I was standing in the middle of my wife's party. A party she had insisted on hosting. A party I helped pay for. A party where I was supposed to be just another guest. But I was not just another guest. Not when I could feel every single person in that room slowly turning their attention toward me, like I was the punchline of a joke I hadn't agreed to be part of. And it all started when her coworker looked at me, smiled like he owned the room, and said the words that changed everything. The house was packed. My wife, Danielle, had gone all out. String lights across the backyard, expensive catering, a hired bartender mixing drinks like it was some Hollywood event. Her coworkers filled the space with loud laughter, forced compliments, and that polished corporate energy people carry when they're trying too hard to impress each other. I stood near the sliding door, half inside the house, half outside in the cold air. That's where I always ended up at these things. Not because I didn't belong in a crowd, but because I didn't belong in hers. Danielle worked in marketing at a fast-growing tech company in San Diego. She loved the spotlight, loved being the woman everyone remembers. She was confident in a way that used to attract me like gravity. Used to. Now it felt different. Now it felt like she needed the spotlight more than she needed me. I took a sip of my drink and scanned the crowd. Her coworker, Jason, was easy to spot. He was the kind of man who never needed to raise his voice because people already leaned in when he spoke. Tailored blazer, perfect posture, expensive watch that caught the light every time he gestured. He was standing too close to Danielle. Too comfortable. She was laughing at something he said, touching his arm lightly like it was nothing, like it was automatic. And I noticed something I didn't want to notice. She wasn't looking at me once. Not even accidentally. That should have been my first warning. Jason eventually made his way toward me. I could feel it before I saw it, the shift in energy, the subtle opening of space as people unconsciously gave him room, like he was the main character walking into a scene. He stopped right in front of me. Up close, his smile was sharper, controlled, calculated. "You must be Mark," he said, like he already knew the answer but enjoyed asking anyway. I nodded once, yeah. He glanced around the party, then back at me. "I've heard about you." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tight. "Oh yeah," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He smiled wider. "Yeah, Danielle talks about you at work." That line hit differently than it should have. Because of the pause after it. Because of the way his eyes flickered, just for a second, like there was more he wasn't saying out loud. Before I could respond, he raised his glass slightly. "To meeting you," he said. I tapped my glass against his. It felt like a warning I didn't understand yet. The party went on. Music, laughter, the smell of grilled food drifting through the backyard. But I stopped enjoying it somewhere between the second drink and the moment I noticed Danielle checking her phone more than she looked at me. Jason stayed close. Too close. Not in an obvious way, but in a way that made it hard to call out. He never interrupted her conversations. He just inserted himself into them like he belonged there more than I did. And the worst part? People accepted it. They laughed at his jokes louder than mine. They listened to him more carefully than me. Even Danielle tilted her body toward him when he spoke. That's when I started feeling it. That slow, sinking realization that something in this room was off balance, and I was the only one feeling the tilt. Later in the evening, I found myself standing near the bar setup inside the kitchen. Alone again. I watched Danielle across the room. She was glowing in that effortless way she had when she was on. Hair perfectly styled, dress hugging her figure just right, smile practiced but convincing. Jason leaned in to say something to her. She laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one. The kind she used to give me. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger yet. Not fully. Something worse. Awareness. "Hey." Jason's voice came from behind me again. I turned slowly. He was closer this time, holding a drink he didn't need. "You're pretty quiet," he said. "I'm observing," I replied. He chuckled. "Observing what?" I didn't answer immediately, because I wasn't sure how honest I wanted to be. Then he leaned slightly against the counter, casual as ever. "You know," he said, "Danielle's different when she talks about you." That line again. I looked at him. Different how? He shrugged, like, "She's not sure where you fit anymore." That landed harder than anything else that night. I stared at him, waiting for him to explain, waiting for him to say he was joking. But he didn't. Instead, he just took a slow sip of his drink and smiled. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. A message from Danielle. "Be nice tonight. Everyone's here for me. Don't make it weird." I read it twice. Then a third time. Something in me shifted after that. Because it wasn't just what she said. It was how natural it sounded to her. Like I was the problem in a party I helped build. Like I was the guest in my own life. I looked up. Jason was still watching me. And for the first time that night, I noticed something different in his expression. Not confidence. Not arrogance. Expectation. Like he was waiting for something to break. And I suddenly had the sinking feeling that I was already inside a moment that had been planned long before I arrived. And I was right. I just didn't know how far it was going to go. Jason didn't move right away. He just stood there, like he was studying me the way someone studies a problem they already know the answer to. The kitchen felt louder suddenly, even though nothing had changed. The ice machine clicked, laughter outside burst in short waves through the sliding door, and the bass from the speakers pulsed through the floor like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. And yet the only thing I could focus on was him. Jason took another slow sip of his drink. Then he said, almost casually, "You ever feel like you're watching your own life from the outside?" I didn't answer, because I didn't like how accurate that question felt. He smiled like he knew I wouldn't. "That's kind of what tonight is," he continued, "for you." My jaw tightened slightly. What is that supposed to mean? He tilted his head, studying me again. "Nothing personal, just observation." That word again. Observation. Like I was an exhibit instead of a person. Before I could push further, Danielle's voice floated in from the living room. "Jason, come on, they're doing photos." Her tone was bright, controlled, the same tone she used when she was performing for an audience. Jason glanced toward her, then back at me. And for a split second, something flickered in his expression, something sharper than confidence. "Enjoy the night, Mark," he said quietly. Then he walked away like nothing happened. Like he hadn't just left a crack in the foundation of everything I thought I understood. The photos started shortly after. Of course they did. Danielle loved photos. Loved capturing moments. Loved controlling how things looked more than how things actually were. I stayed near the edge of the room as people gathered in small clusters in front of the backyard lights. Someone had set up a makeshift backdrop with fairy lights and a floral arrangement that probably cost more than my first car. Danielle was at the center of it all. Laughing, posing, touching shoulders, leaning into people like she was anchoring herself to them. And Jason never left her side. Not once. At first, it looked harmless. Coworker closeness. Professional chemistry. The kind of thing people excuse easily. But then I noticed the small things. The way he positioned himself just slightly closer in every photo. The way Danielle didn't correct it. The way she didn't move away either. And the way she stopped looking for me entirely. That last part hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just quiet disappearance. Like I was being edited out of something I used to be part of. At one point, someone handed me a drink. I don't even remember who. I remember taking it, holding it, not drinking it. I remember watching Danielle laugh at something Jason whispered into her ear. And I remember thinking, when did I become optional in my own marriage? That thought hit harder than anything Jason had said. Because Jason was just a stranger. But Danielle wasn't. She was the person who used to fall asleep on my chest. The person who used to text me stupid jokes during work meetings. The person who used to say, "You're my safe place," like it meant something permanent. And now, she couldn't even look at me for more than 2 seconds. Later, I found myself outside again. Same spot. Sliding door behind me slightly open. Cold air mixing with warm music. I watched the reflection of the party in the glass instead of the people directly. It made everything feel slightly unreal, like I was watching a version of my life someone else had edited badly. That's when Danielle finally came over. Alone. For the first time all night. She looked different up close. Still perfect, still composed, but something in her eyes was sharper, more impatient. "You're being quiet," she said immediately. I let out a short breath. "I've been quiet all night." She crossed her arms. "People are noticing." "People," I repeated, "or you?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't do that," she said. "Do what?" "Make this about something it's not." I stared at her for a second. Something inside me wanted to ask 1,000 questions at once. But I chose one. "Do you even want me here?" I asked. That question landed differently than I expected. Because she didn't answer immediately. She looked past me for a moment, back toward the party, where Jason was laughing with her coworkers like he belonged there more than I did. Then she said quietly, "Of course I do." But she didn't sound like she meant it. She sounded like she was supposed to say it. Inside, something shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. But I felt it. That internal click when denial starts losing its grip. Danielle exhaled sharply. "Look, I don't want you making things awkward tonight. Jason is important to my team and—" I interrupted her before I could stop myself. "Why is he so important to you?" That stopped her. Just for a second. But I saw it. That micro-expression. The hesitation. The calculation behind her eyes. Then she recovered too quickly. "Because he's my colleague," she said. "That's it." But her voice was slightly too fast. Too rehearsed. And I knew, in that moment, something I didn't want to know. We stood there in silence. Music thumping behind us. Guests laughing inside. A perfect party happening for a perfect version of a life that didn't include the truth. Danielle eventually stepped back. "I'm going inside," she said flatly. "Try to enjoy yourself." And then she left me there. Again. I watched her walk back in. Watched Jason immediately turn toward her like he had been waiting. Watched her smile return instantly. Like it had never left. And that's when I felt it. Not anger yet. Not rage. Something colder. Clearer. The beginning of understanding. Because I finally realized something about Jason. He wasn't just trying to impress her. He wasn't just being confident. He wasn't even just flirting. He was testing something. And I was the test subject. The party wasn't a celebration. It was a stage. And I was slowly realizing I hadn't been invited to it as a guest. I had been placed there as part of the experiment. And whatever Jason was trying to prove, it was already in motion. I didn't go back inside immediately. I stayed outside, standing in the cold like it could somehow slow my thoughts down. But it didn't. If anything, the silence made everything louder. The music from inside thumped through the walls like a second heartbeat, one that belonged to the house, not me. Every laugh that slipped out through the open door felt sharper now. Every cheer, every clink of glasses, every voice calling Jason's name or Danielle's name, it all felt organized, structured. Like a system I was no longer part of. I looked down at my drink. Still untouched. Still useless. Then I finally did what I'd been avoiding all night. I went back in. The shift was immediate. Not in the room. In me. The moment I stepped through the sliding door, it was like crossing into a different version of reality. One where everyone had already agreed on something I wasn't included in. Danielle was near the center again. Jason beside her again. Same formation. Same gravity. Like they naturally pulled toward each other. And I noticed something else now. People weren't just watching them. They were watching me watching them. That was new. That was intentional. Jason saw me first. Of course he did. He always seemed to. He didn't smile this time. Not fully. Just a small acknowledgement, like a nod between people who know a secret the rest of the room hasn't figured out yet. Then he said something to Danielle. I couldn't hear it, but I saw her reaction. A quick laugh. A hand touch his arm. Too familiar. Too practiced. And then her eyes flicked toward me. Just for a second. And she looked away again immediately. Like she didn't want to hold that moment too long. Like it meant something she didn't want to admit existed. That was the first time I felt it clearly. Not confusion. Not suspicion. But direction. Like I was being guided toward something. A few minutes later, Jason stepped away from Danielle. And came straight toward me. Again. This time, he didn't stop at distance. He came close enough that it wasn't casual anymore. Close enough that it was deliberate. You're still here, he said. It wasn't a question. No surprise, I replied. He nodded slightly, like he was appreciating the response. Then he glanced around the room. Danielle's doing great tonight, he said. I noticed. A pause. Then he added, she's really herself around people who understand her. That sentence landed differently than the others. Because it wasn't just comparison. It was classification. People who understand her. And implicitly, people who don't. I held his gaze. What are you trying to say, Jason? He exhaled lightly, like I was the one being difficult. I'm not trying to say anything, he said. I'm just observing. There it was again. That word. Observing. I stepped slightly closer, without realizing it. Stop saying that like it means something, I said quietly. For the first time that night, his smile faded a little. Not gone. Just controlled. You think I'm the problem here, he said. I didn't answer. He nodded like he expected that. Then he leaned in slightly. Let me ask you something, he said. When was the last time Danielle looked at you the way she looks at me tonight? The question wasn't loud. But it hit like a punch. Because it wasn't insulting. It was precise. And I hated how quickly my mind searched for an answer. Before I could respond, someone laughed loudly behind us. A group photo was forming again. Danielle was being pulled back into the center. Jason stepped slightly aside but didn't leave. He just watched. And so did I. Except now I wasn't just watching her. I was watching him, watching her, watching me, asterisk. It felt like a loop tightening. Like something closing in. Danielle called out, Mark, come on, we need everyone. Her voice sounded cheerful. But it didn't sound personal. It sounded required. I hesitated. Just for a second. That's all it took. Jason leaned slightly toward me again, just enough that only I could hear him. You don't have to, he said quietly. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Because it wasn't a challenge. It wasn't sarcasm. It was permission. And that made it worse. I walked toward the group anyway. Because I needed to see it. I needed to understand what I was standing inside of. Phones came out. People started positioning themselves. Danielle stood in the center again. Jason immediately on her right. And there was an empty space on her left. A space that used to be mine. I stepped into it. But something felt wrong instantly. Not physically. Socially. Like the placement was incorrect. Like I was standing where I no longer belonged in the structure. Danielle didn't adjust. She didn't acknowledge it. She just smiled at the camera. Jason leaned in slightly. Closer than necessary. Closer than professional. And no one reacted. No one corrected it. Not even her. Ready, someone called. Click. Flash. First photo. Then another. And another. And in every single one. Jason looked exactly where he needed to. Danielle looked exactly where she was told to look. And I looked like I was standing in the wrong frame of my own life. After the photos, people scattered again. The energy loosened. But mine didn't. I stayed in place. Danielle finally turned to me. Her smile was still on her face, but her eyes were tired now. Or maybe impatient. "I think you're overthinking tonight," she said softly. That word again. Overthinking. Like everything I felt was a malfunction. Not information. "I think I'm finally thinking clearly," I said back. That made her pause. Just slightly. Jason appeared behind her again, almost instantly. Like he never left her orbit. Like he didn't need to. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully admitted yet. This wasn't just a coworker. This wasn't just social closeness. This was alignment. And I wasn't aligned with anything in this room anymore. Not even her. Jason met my eyes one last time across the crowd. And this time, there was no smile. Just calm certainty. Like whatever he had been testing. He had already seen enough. And now he was waiting. For my reaction. The rest of the night didn't feel like a continuation anymore. It felt like escalation. Like whatever invisible line I had been standing near had finally been crossed, and now everything was operating under a different set of rules that only a few people understood. And I wasn't one of them. The party kept moving, but I didn't. I stayed near the edge again, not because I wanted to, but because every time I tried to step closer, I felt it. This quiet resistance from the room itself. Not obvious. Not spoken. Just subtle enough to make me question my presence in every direction I moved. Danielle was still the center of it all. Jason was still beside her. And now, I noticed something I hadn't allowed myself to fully see before. It wasn't just closeness. It was coordination. They didn't just stand near each other. They moved like they expected each other to move. Like they were following a script I wasn't given. At one point, I caught Danielle looking at me from across the room. Not briefly. Not accidentally. For longer than before. But it didn't feel like connection. It felt like assessment. Like she was measuring how I was holding up. Jason leaned down and said something to her. She nodded once. Then looked away from me completely. That single exchange did something to me I didn't expect. It removed uncertainty. Because uncertainty keeps you hoping. And that moment removed hope from the equation. I walked outside again. Not because I was leaving. Because I needed air that didn't belong to that room. The night outside was colder now. Quieter. But even out here, I couldn't escape it. The house behind me still glowed with movement, shadows shifting through windows, laughter spilling out in fragments. A life continuing without me properly inside it. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes for a moment. And that's when I heard footsteps. Jason. Of course. He didn't rush. He never rushed. He stepped outside slowly, like he had all the time in the world and knew I didn't. He stopped a few feet away. Taking a break, he asked. I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, "You following me now?" He gave a small shrug. Not really, you're just predictable tonight. That word again. Predictable. I turned my head slightly toward him. You seem very comfortable deciding what I am, I said. He smiled faintly. I'm not deciding, I'm observing patterns. I let out a short breath. You keep saying that like it excuses everything you do. That made him pause just slightly. Not defensively. Curiously. Then he said, you think I'm doing something to you. I stared at him. He continued, calmer now. But I'm not, he said. I'm just showing you what's already there. That line sat heavier than anything else he'd said all night. Because it wasn't accusation. It wasn't insult. It was framing. Inside the house, a loud cheer erupted. Something had happened. A toast. A speech. I didn't move. Jason glanced inside, then back at me. You know what tonight is really about? He asked. I didn't respond. He answered anyway. It's not a party, he said. It's an announcement. My chest tightened slightly. An announcement of what? He looked at me for a long moment before answering. Alignment, he said simply. I almost laughed. But it didn't come out as humor. It came out as disbelief. You're talking in circles, I said. He shook his head slightly. No, you just don't want to hear it clearly. Another cheer from inside. Danielle's voice this time. Bright. Confident. Performing. Jason turned slightly toward the house. She's good at this, he said. Good at what? I asked. He finally looked back at me. At being seen, he said, by the right people. That hit differently. Because it didn't sound like jealousy. It sounded like selection. I pushed off the wall slightly. What exactly are you trying to prove here, Jason? I asked. For the first time all night, his expression softened, but not in a comforting way. More like confirmation. I'm not proving anything, he said. I already know. A pause. Then he added something quieter. The question is whether you do. That line stayed in the air longer than anything else had. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. About what I was refusing to see. Inside, the music shifted. Slower now. More intimate. People were dancing. Or pretending to. Jason stepped slightly closer, but still not threatening. Just precise. You ever notice how people don't correct things that feel wrong anymore? He asked. I frowned slightly. What does that mean? He nodded toward the house. Look, he said. I did. And that's when I saw it. Danielle was standing in the center of a small group again. Laughing. Talking. But now her body language was different. Not casual. Not relaxed. Intentional. And Jason wasn't with her. Not physically. But I could still feel him, connected to the moment. Like he had already shaped it. Like he had stepped back on purpose. To let something unfold. She's doing it now, Jason said quietly. Doing what? I asked. He didn't look at me this time. She's choosing how she wants to be seen, he said. That sentence felt loaded. Because it implied she was choosing someone else's version of her life. Not mine. Not ours. Just a version. I finally turned fully toward him. My voice lowered. Why are you really here, Jason? This time, he didn't smile. He didn't deflect. He just looked at me and said the most direct thing he had said all night. Because she wanted me here, he said. No pause. No hesitation. Just certainty. Inside the house, Danielle laughed again. And for the first time all night, I didn't wonder what she was laughing at. I wondered what she had already decided. And why I was the only one still trying to figure it out. Jason's words didn't echo. They settled. Like they didn't belong in the air anymore. They belonged inside me, rearranging something I didn't realize could still be rearranged. Because she wanted me here. No hesitation. No softness. Just ownership of the moment he had been orbiting all night. I stood there for a few seconds without speaking. Not because I had nothing to say, but because anything I said would have to pass through something heavier first. Truth. Or denial. And I wasn't sure which one I had left. Inside the house, the party was reaching its final shape. That strange late-stage energy where people start believing the night is already a memory, even while they're still inside it. Music lower now. Laughter looser. Conversations splitting into smaller, more private pieces. And Danielle, still in the center, but not just socially anymore. Emotionally. She had shifted from host to presence. And everyone responded to her differently now. Not like she was organizing the room, but like she was defining it. Jason leaned slightly against the wall outside, calm again. Like the conversation hadn't changed anything for him. Like it had only confirmed what he already knew. You look like you want to say something, he said. I exhaled slowly. I want to understand, I replied. He nodded once. That's the problem. You're still trying to understand instead of accepting. I turned my head toward him. Accept what? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked through the glass doors at Danielle. Long enough that it stopped feeling like observation. and started feeling like recognition. Then he said that you're not part of the version of her life she's choosing anymore. That sentence didn't hit like shock. It hit like repetition, like something I had already felt earlier but refused to name. Inside, Danielle's laughter rose again. This time, I watched her more carefully. Not emotionally. Analytically. And I saw it. The distance. Not between her and me. Between her and hesitation. She wasn't conflicted. She wasn't torn. She was decided. And that realization didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It clarified. Jason stepped off the wall. Slowly. Tonight wasn't random, he said. I looked at him. He continued. It was context, he added. I frowned slightly. Context for what? He finally met my eyes fully. For what she's been trying to avoid saying out loud, he said. I felt my jaw tighten again. And what is that? I asked. A pause. Not dramatic. Just final. Then he said it. She's outgrowing the version of her life you're still holding onto. The words didn't explode. They removed weight. Like something I had been carrying, without realizing it had been taken off my shoulders. And for a second, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel betrayal. I felt stillness. Because somewhere inside that sentence, there was something I couldn't argue with anymore. Not because it was fair, but because it matched what I had been seeing all night. Inside, Danielle moved toward the center again. But this time, she wasn't pulled there. She went willingly. And Jason wasn't beside her. He stayed outside. With me. And that felt more intentional than anything else. I finally spoke again. My voice was quieter now. So what happens now? I asked. Jason looked at me for a long moment. Not like a rival. Not like a friend. Like someone watching a threshold. Then he said, now you decide what version of this night you're going to live in. I let out a short breath. There's more than one. He nodded slightly. Oh yeah, he said. There's the one where you fight for a place you've already lost. A pause. And the one where you finally see why it ended before it ended. Inside the house, Danielle raised her glass. A final toast. People cheered. Phones lifted. Lights flashed. And I watched her face. Not the performance. Not the crowd response. Her. And for the first time all night, she didn't look back at me. Not even once. Jason pushed off the wall. Don't make it about me, he said quietly. It was never about me. Then he stepped past me toward the door, but stopped just before going inside. He didn't turn around when he said the last thing. He just left it there. Sometimes, he said, the disrespect you feel isn't coming from betrayal. A pause. It's coming from the moment you realize you stopped being chosen. And then he went back inside. I stayed outside. Long after the laughter softened. Long after the music ended. Long after the party became just a house again. And I finally understood something I hadn't been willing to see all night. Jason wasn't the beginning of this. He wasn't even the cause. He was just the confirmation of something that had already changed long before he ever smiled at me. And inside that silence, I had to decide what came next. Not for the party. Not for Danielle. But for the version of me that was still standing outside the life I thought I was in.